On the evening of December 13, 1862, after repeated Union assaults at Fredericksburg, hundreds of U.S. soldiers lay wounded in front of the sunken road. The best-known story from that time tells of a young Confederate who climbed over the stone wall and carried water to his wounded enemies. That man, later identified as Richard Kirkland of the 2nd South Carolina, became known as the Angel of Marye's Heights. But how much of that tale is really true? Accounts confirm that Confederates did cross lines to aid wounded Union soldiers. Within weeks of the battle, Walt Whitman, volunteering in Union hospitals, recorded a Pennsylvania soldier's recollection that several Confederates and civilians ventured among the fallen to bind wounds and share food and water. And before 1870, South Carolina's James R. Hagood wrote of a soldier from Kershaw's brigade who went over the wall to relieve a Union wounded man, prompting firing to cease once his purpose was clear. These independent testimonies strongly suggest that acts of mercy occurred in front of the stone wall at Fredericksburg. But the version of the story that made Kirkland famous came much later. In 1880, Brigadier General Joseph Kershaw was asked to identify the Good Samaritan that came from his brigade. Kershaw promptly named Richard Kirkland and supplied a vivid narrative that has since become the definitive telling. In subsequent years, at least 5 men from the 2nd South Carolina also associated the deed with Kirkland. At the same time, details in Kershaw's 1880 publication raise valid questions. The dialogue and descriptions are difficult to credit after a 17-year interval and seem very embellished. And there were also errors in the story. For instance, Kirkland was not promoted to lieutenant for gallantry at Gettysburg. He remained a sergeant until his death at Chickamauga on September 20th, 1863. And while the image of leaping the wall is dramatic, a break in the stone wall near the Stevens house suggests he likely exited through the yard after filling his canteen at the nearby well, rather than jumping the wall. Will we ever really know how true Kirkland's story is? Probably not. But the legend endures because it points to something true, even if the edges are softened by memory.